Hi, welcome to a no BS tutorial. If you followed the first one, you might have modeled this chain. If you haven't, you don't really need to follow this tutorial. You can use any model you have that you want to simulate in MassFX. And this tutorial specifically targets concave shapes such as this one, or donuts, if you're interested. But anyways, let's start off by optimizing our model. If we don't do this, MassFX might not like it, and our contact mesh will take a long time to calculate. So before we go any further, let's duplicate our original model and create an object that's named contact mesh. You can name it anything as long as you know what you name it. And I'm going to make this first one a kinematic rigid body because I'm going to set keyframes for it. Kinematic rigid bodies are affected by keyframes, and they can become a dynamic rigid body when you specify the until frame value. And dynamic rigid bodies are affected by gravity and collisions. Static rigid bodies are affected by collisions, but they stay in place. Now, continuing, I shouldn't have made this object a MassFX rigid body so soon. So I'm going to go to the editable poly menu, or editable poly layer, and add a pro optimizer to it. Hit calculate and turn the vertices down about 20. And just maintain a balance between detail and quality. The less polygons there are, the less time it will take to calculate. So a value between 20 to 50 works, but it's up to you to decide. I'm going to leave mine at 35. And then I'm going to go to my MassFX rigid body layer, use the steel preset, and under the shape type is going to be concave. Increase the mesh detail to 100 and hit generate. Now to give our mesh an inspection, go to the mesh transform type, the mesh transform layer, and we can see that we have that ugly thing right there. Let's see if we can fix it by going to the Pro Optimizer and setting our vertices count to 40 and regenerating our mesh. Now it looks much better, and although it's not perfect, it should be sufficient to give the result we need. Now I'm going to unhide the other things that I hid earlier. Duplicate these. Well, before I duplicate, I'm going to get out of the mesh transform sub-object. And now I can duplicate. Now I'm only going to rotate my contact mesh. Hit rewind. Let's go back to here. Before I duplicate, I need to link my original to my contact mesh. Using the select and link tool. Now my original follows my contact mesh, but is not actually part of the simulation. Now I can duplicate it and only rotate my contact mesh 90 degrees because everything else is linked to it. And this one I'm going to set as a dynamic rigid body. Make a copy of it. The reason I'm only rotating my contact mesh is because sometimes the objects become out of place like that. And because everything is linked to my contact mesh, there shouldn't be an issue. Anyways, now I'm free to duplicate these as many times as I want. As of right now, I can hit simulate. And MassFX does the simulation as MassFX will simulate the physics as they would be at that position. Because my chain started out floating, now let's specify some keyframes for that object. Go to frame 60 or any frame and move the original link anywhere. For effect and to prove a point, I'm going to set keyframes to the movement to happen in 30 frames. So now I'll hit simulate again. And that is the most desired result. If you didn't get that result, by default MassFX starts with what I believe is substep 0 and solver iterations 4. If I hit simulate now, it will do it quicker but in a less accurate form. And this is what happens. Objects become ghosts. To fix that, increase your solver iterations and substeps, and the issue should be solved. Just keep in mind, the higher the values, the more time it takes. Something else that you might have encountered is this. Right from the start, the chain buckled and just went straight up in an abnormal fashion. The reason this happened was because my objects are below my ground height, which is z equals 0. And because of this, MassFX doesn't like anything being below or at 0. I can solve this by moving my objects above the 0 line, and now I can hit simulate and my chain won't buckle. Now let's go on to the rendering part of this. And for effect, I'm going to make my contact meshes have a purple color. If I hit render, well, give me a second. I already fixed my issue because this is a redo. Anyways, if I hit render, you shouldn't have a layer already. If you did, good for you. You're ahead of everyone. But if I were to hit render, that would be the result. To fix that error, I'm going to select all my contact meshes because they were optimized using the Pro Optimizer, and create a new layer. Which will serve as a holding layer for my objects. And to finish, I'm going to turn off render and radiosity for that layer. And if I hit render now, only my important components, I guess, will show. And to simulate, to be able to play my simulation back on the frames, I need to hit bake all, and all my keyframes will be saved, or all my chains motion will be saved. And I'm going to stop this at 100. Or 70. And I don't even know. It should have saved my keyframes. I guess it needed to finish. So, yes, that's it. Quick overview: if your object buckles at the beginning, make sure it's above your ground height. If your object looks like that in the render, make sure all your contact meshes are in a separate layer. And render and radiosity is off. If your objects are ghost, make sure to increase your substeps and solver iterations. If your processor has a capability, you can turn on use multithreading to speed up the process. And you can specify, and make sure to specify a material type for it, which will, I guess, make it look more real. And this affects how the model will behave. And that's it. See you.